Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Gruesome and Grotesque video. Well, it looks like everyone really liked the last video that I did involving John Jones, the man who unfortunately met his demise pretty much forever stuck in a cave. And so in this case, I came across a very recent story. It actually just happened a couple of days back, and it's involving another tale, one that I thought would fit perfectly with regards to this series. I mentioned this earlier that when it comes to this series, if I just come across these articles, then I'll go ahead and talk about them here just randomly. Who knows, I may do some suggestions later on as well, but otherwise, at least I'll be able to showcase this stuff from here on out. And I picked this also because it reminded me of a favorite movie of mine, one that I happened to see and also read, and also the audiobook quite often. So it has to do with this. It's about the unfortunate tale of the woman, anonymous woman, it sounds like, who was eaten alive by some hungry pigs. So let's go ahead and let's share all the information associated with this very unfortunate circumstance. So in this case, and I found an article here from from dailymail.com, and I'll post it here so that way you can see the information. But it has to do with a woman, an anonymous woman, who a couple of days back was apparently eaten alive by her very own pigs. This happened in a place in a Russian region called Udmurtia, which you're looking at a picture of here. So as far as where this location is, it looks like it's pretty remote out there. It looks like this farm of hers, no doubt, was probably in their possession for the longest time, her and her husband. So whatever she was doing that day, that morning, no doubt was just part of a routine as far as coming out, feeding the pigs, taking care of them, and so forth. But this particular day, it was one unfortunate circumstance that authorities are surmising, at least for now, that led to her gruesome demise. So here's what happened. On that time period, her husband, who apparently normally joined her in these things as far as feeding the swine, was ill. And so he was asleep during this entire time period. She, in turn, got up and then was able to go out to her farm and then try to take care of business, try to take care of all the farm activities. Now you're actually looking at the pigs associated with this story right here. These swine are not your normal pigs. Like, these are giant pigs. These are pigs that weigh several hundred pounds. In fact, I was reading somewhere that some of these pigs could weigh upwards of 700 pounds as well. So these are not tiny animals. Big animals, big appetites, and they're known for eating pretty much anything, and that includes the unfortunate circumstance of people. In fact, when I was looking at this information, this is not the very first time that this has happened. There has been a lot of other, not too many, but more than a handful of circumstances also involving this very same scenario. So pretty sad when it comes to having like a way to go in this world. So because her husband didn't join her, she was taking care of all this stuff. She was feeding the swine, and then something happened, almost like lightning in a bottle. And the idea is this: either she had some kind of epileptic fit, maybe she was known to have this in the past. The article was kind of light on information, so why this was suggested, who knows? Or she fainted, either on her by herself or something caused her to faint. Either way, though, this lightning in the bottom moment occurred right there, right when she was on top of the place, whatever it was that was holding the enclosure, essentially, that was holding all these pigs together. And then lo and behold, right when that happened, she fell over and then fell right into their location, and then everything else happened afterward. The pigs, of course, are just big dumb animals. They pretty much are always hungry. They see everything as food, as I mentioned earlier, and so they went at it. And so this unfortunate woman, whatever happened right at that moment, it caused her to fall in and then basically be eaten alive. There was no chance whatsoever as far as her being saved. I imagine when I was reading this that this farm is probably out there in the middle of nowhere. Like the nearest neighbor is probably several miles away, if anything, and that's probably on a close remote level. So her, let's say if she was screaming for help, her husband was asleep. He would have been the only help. Anyone else, nearby neighbors, nothing, nobody would have heard anything as far as her screams. So unless somebody just happened to be walking by, just by pure happen chance, again there was no chance at all for her. Finally, her husband woke up. I think he woke up just basically on his own. And when he went to look for her, the story goes, he didn't find her in a home. He didn't find her nearby. And so he went to look for her. Maybe he was thinking, okay, she's feeding the pigs again. And then that's when he found her partly devoured body. In fact, the way it was told in this story was basically her face, her ears, and her shoulders were completely gone. Like they were just outright gone. These pigs, they're almost like piranhas. They'll eat everything that they can, bones, everything. Nothing is essentially left over unless the pig doesn't want to eat it. So that's what happened to her. She was found. The authorities were contacted. In fact, there's the authorities there are called the investigative committee. It's just natural, like when it comes to somebody being deceased, that they come out and then do some kind of investigation. And this is their quote: "The opinion of forensic experts has been requested in this case, and that way their aim is to quote establish all the circumstances and reasons for what happened." So if you're reading into that more, it basically means that they're just trying to make sure that this death was caused not by ill purposes, like there wasn't another party involved, somebody like let's say pushing her into the enclosure or something else that caused her to purposely fall under. Instead, they're just trying to make sure that this story is pretty much just as is. This was just an ill circumstance, and it led to her gruesome demise because of this. In fact, the detectives stated that in all of their years, they never really encountered something like this, what they considered a very shocking case. So when this committee finishes their investigation, who knows? But no doubt they'll find that that's what occurred. Unless who knows, maybe there's something else more nefarious that might have happened as well. But until that occurs, then at least that's the story going on here. And remember, if all of this sounds familiar, if you've seen that movie Hannibal, which again I mentioned is a favorite of mine, it's a really good movie. I love the book. I love the audiobook as well. The movie took a little bit more twists and turns from those two sources as well, and it kind of went off in its own direction. But there's a very prominent scene there where Mason Verger, who was like the main villain of the movie, has the entire film basically tracking down Hannibal, finally captures him, puts him on top of some kind of device, something like a freight train or something like that, where that way he's locked up, and then that way the pigs that he's been basically holding for a special purpose like this can devour him alive, starting from the feet and upwards. But as it turns out, of course, the movie shows that Hannibal switches things over, he escapes, and then he has Mason Verger's assistant throw him into the swine themselves. So that way he dies by the pigs basically eating him alive. So whenever I was reading all this information about what happened to this unfortunate woman, it instantly reminded me of that same scenario of someone falling into an enclosure in the case of Hannibal, where it was Mason Verger being pushed into it and then being devoured alive. So very gruesome way to go out. My heart goes out to this poor woman. Hopefully, like it was just as quick as possible, as opposed to John Jones, who I was talking about the other day, how it happened over a day or so, being trapped in that very, very claustrophobic environment. But in this case, if it was quick, then that's the best news associated with what occurred with this woman. And again, this is not the first time that this has happened. There's another one, apparently someplace in Oregon. There was another situation that occurred there as well. It was a couple of years back. I think looking at it, it was about 2012 that occurred, and I'll include the link for it below. And then there was apparently another circumstance as well, where another woman, I think it was in another part of Russia or Romania to be specific, also encountered the very same thing. Like this was in something involving them going into the enclosure and then having themselves eaten alive. So quite a strange set of circumstances. All this stuff seems to happen just by pure happen chance. So what do you guys think with regards to this latest gruesome and grotesque tale? What a way to go, in other words, here involving this anonymous woman. I wonder whether her name hasn't been published yet. Maybe just the police are keeping it confidential while the investigation is happening, or maybe the family has requested that it hasn't gone out, like in terms of her name yet. Who knows? Or maybe it's just nobody really knows much info associated with that remote Russian region called Udmurtia. But it's still, though, if something like that comes across, I'll share it with everyone as an update too. But anybody that has any comments, anything they wanted to post below, please do so as well. Have you seen that movie, by the way, Hannibal, which I really liked? If you like it as well, or what your comments are that mimic this scene that I was mentioning, then post those comments too. It also has that really great scene where the pigs surround Hannibal, but he's of course so evil, he's so intimidating that they just do nothing to him, as opposed to going towards Mason Verger. So that was also another very prominent scene. So, all right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.